So welcome everyone to Canio's lunchtime discussion on the topic of writing as a spiritual practice. We are pleased to have with us today four very distinguished writers who are engaged in their practice of writing and their spiritual practice as well. Joining us are the poets Meegan Chasky from Sag Harbor and Mark Burrows from Camden, Maine. And we have the fiction writers Indira Ganizin from Cape Cod and Mirzban Shroff from Mumbai. So the format is that each of them are going to give us a little taste of their work, as well as a little discussion of their practice. And then afterwards, they'll be in conversation with each other. And then the participants will be able to ask them questions. We may not be able to get to all the questions. We'll do our best. And we look at this as really the first of hopefully a number of events or meetings on the topic to come. So, as we all know, many writers like Natalie Goldberg have often suggested that spiritual practices can develop one's own writing skills. And so we're going to hear today, starting from the poet Mark Burrows, how that works in his particular environment and his particular craft. So Mark is a poet, a scholar, teacher, and translator of German literature. He is a retreat leader as well, and he teaches workshops both in the US, in the UK, and also in Europe. His work explores the intersection of theology and poetics, as well as spirituality and the arts. Mark's recent book include The Chance of Home, and he is now completing a book on the spiritual visions of Rainer Maria Rilke. We'll look forward to that. So would you please give a warm Zoom welcome now to the poet, Mark Burrows.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this invitation to join this wonderful event with writers whom I look forward to meeting. It's a little difficult being the first one on the docket here, because the topic itself is a complicated one, writing as a spiritual practice. And I'm not going to answer exactly or try to say what spiritual practice means, but I think it's a good choice of words, because writing is a practice, first of all. It's not something that just happens to us. You have to show up, and you have to show up when it doesn't feel right, and you have to keep showing up when nothing is happening. And if that's certainly not unique to writing, it's unique to every deep venture in our lives. We don't manage and control the world we live in. We don't even manage and control the most important parts of our own lives, most of which we really don't know. When you think about the way our brain works, the conscious brain is aware of perhaps 10% of what's happening in the unconscious part of our life. And for me, at least, paying attention to that unconscious part has been a huge part of my writing practice. So perhaps it's different for someone writing a novel. I don't know. I'm an academic writer as well. And that's very much a different project. That's a more linear project, I would say, in some ways, setting forth an argument. But writing poetry is fundamentally an act of paying attention. And Simone Weil, the great French philosopher, workers' advocate, and revolutionary, really, Simone Weil wrote a beautiful essay in which she described prayer as fundamentally an act of paying attention, an act of opening ourselves to what is real, what we perhaps don't ever quite fully understand. And certainly, a spiritual practice opens us to things that we can only intuit, that we can never bring into language. And yet that's what writing is about. It's trying to bring into language something imaginable, something experienceable, if that's a word I can simply coin. It's an awkward word, sorry about that. Something capable of being experienced. Rilke put it this way, he said, poetry isn't feelings, it's an experience. And I think every great poem that you or I might read, or perhaps even write, is about an experience. And the reader's experience is different from the writer's experience. I don't know when I've shared a poem, when I've published a poem, what it will mean. And that's not even the right question. It's not what it means, but how it means, how it finds meaning in the mind and the right life of the reader. So spiritual, what is spiritual? To me, it's a kind of inner orientation. It isn't a thing. It's more a way of being open, of being porous to the world, to its joys and its sufferings, to my own joys and sufferings, to the things I'm afraid of and the things I delight in. And writing is that great chance to try to grasp a little bit of all of that. So I'd like to share a screen for a moment and begin with a poem, well, a part of a poem from Rilke, from a late work of Rilke's, the Sonnets to Orpheus, probably the greatest, one of the greatest examples of modernist German literature. He wrote these 55 sonnets in a burst of creativity over a period of 3 weeks, but he was only writing for 9 days. 55 poems that I would say more than any other piece of German literature shifted the way German writers and readers understood what a poem is, what a sonnet is, and what writing is. And in one of those poems, it begins with a very abrupt command, wolle die Wandlung, almost impossible to translate, but I've rendered it as desire what changes. Oh, be thrilled with the flame that draws from you what brims with transformations. The shaping spirit, mastering all that is of this earth, loves in the flow of things above all, this turning point. Now the poem goes on from there, and I won't read the entire sonnet, but there's so much in these opening lines that helps me understand my own practice as a writer, which is to be attentive to things that are changing, including myself, including you. That when I venture a poem, I'm doing it not as some private moment, but there's a trust involved that the poem itself will somehow find community, create perhaps community within myself, within you as a reader, within others. And what I so love about this very strange beginning of this sonnet is Rilke's attention to the turning point. That point where things are possible to move in many different directions. And every time I begin a poem or find myself in the middle of a poem, and I think it's true of all writing, I never quite know where it's going to take me. If I do, it won't be a good poem. But if I'm aware of the indeterminacy of language, which is the indeterminacy of the human experience, then perhaps the poem will begin to have its way with me. I'll close with a poem of my own from a recent collection, which Catherine just mentioned, The Chance of Home. And the poem is called A Few of the Particulars. I make my way listening among the hours and the days, attending to a few of the particulars. The chatter of a finch hidden in the foliage. The laughter of a child from behind a sheltering hedge. The swirling autumn winds rustling the last brittle leaves that still cling to the old oak's arms, long practiced in the art of holding up the acres of sky. Each opens our eyes to the ever forward fling of things. Each gestures to a deeper flow than we can ever know or finally say. Among these, I look for traces of a hidden whole, gazing on what I cannot grasp within the glimpse of what I can, opening my breath to the lure of distances that pulses in all that lives in this theater of here and now. I'll close with that poem. It's a poem about change and about something that endures in and through change. And that something is really at the heart of everything my poetry, I think, is about. It's not something I can control or contain. It's not something I can declare or manage. It's something that flows through me as a writer and flows through you as a reader. And those moments of sensing how things hold together in the midst of all of the evidence to the contrary, the suffering, the tragedies, the absurdities that happen in our own lives, there still is something that I've described here as traces of a hidden whole. And for me, those traces are finally what makes poetry matter. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I just would like to say we have Mark's book in the store for those who are able to come by and take a look at it. And the idea of traces of a hidden whole is wonderful to contemplate for many, many a day. I had the good fortune of taking a workshop with Mark several years ago, and he's a marvelous teacher, and I think that shines through in your presentation just now. So again, thank you. We're going to turn next to the second poet we have with us, Meegan Chasky. We're very happy that Meegan is joining us here from Sag Harbor. Excuse me just a moment, I'm going to mute some of the participants who are not muted. Okay. So Meegan, thank you for being here. Meegan is a poet, a marvelous musician, an educator, a healing practitioner. She's a Nam yoga therapist and meditation teacher. Meegan has created 5 sacred music albums and published several books of poetry, including Voice and Birdsong Under the Wisdom Tree, which is a lifetime of poems, journal entries, and memoir. Her poems have appeared in many anthologies, including Sag Harbor Is and Peace on Earth, a book of prayers from around the world. So again, we're happy Meegan is with us. Let's give a nice Zoom welcome to Meegan Chasky.
Hello, everyone. This is such a joy to be together with this subject. And as I was telling Marianne and Catherine, being invited to speak on this and to share in conversation about this has opened up a whole flood of reflection on this. And I've been waking up in the morning, which is my time when the reflections happen, just flowing with inspired understanding about this. And so as you can hear from what Catherine said, I practice a form of yoga called Nam yoga. And Nam is the sacred sound current. And the root of the word Nam is like name. So it's the identity of the sacred. And it's by participating in that sacred sound current, we can come to close as we can to touching that essence of the divine through the sound current. So the mantras that I use are ancient mantras. And then I set them to my own music, my own melodies that often I've received during meditation. So then I also, Nam Yoga therapy is a lot about the breath. I'm also a flute player as well as a singer, and the instrument of our bodies as the instrument for the breath, and how breath is so much a part of spiritual practices, just universally. And also, I would say that part of this is the human experience of being embodied in our physical selves in the natural world. That is so much a part of my my spiritual communion. And so I'm going to read some poems and feel that they can speak to this. And one of the aspects that I want to bring up in relation to some of these amazing poets that we have who have spoken to this, you know, Rumi and Rilke, of the sense of the longing for the friend, the beloved. And so this is something that that came to me in the morning, the first morning of this whole series of reflections. Writing as a spiritual practice, it's being there at the threshold, that trembling place, that place of, am I here? Am I stepping over? Am I there? That place of longing to touch that presence of the beloved, to be in the presence of the beloved. It is that threshold, that place where the experience of the separation is so tender, such a force to bring us forward, so that we, in that longing, we almost touch what it is to return to being completely within the beloved, completely within that presence, and no separation. And then those moments when we arrive there, such blessed moments of grace, as if the moment we arrive there, we are aware that we are in this physical experience of time and space. At the same time, there's this magical sense that being in this physical realm and this embodiment is the separation. And yet it is through the senses, the sensual, the sensuous, that we feel the presence. It's such a paradox. It's through the touching of the living presence in nature, especially. It becomes a prayer, and it opens up that sense of wonder and awe, which is the expression of gratitude before you even instruct yourself to be grateful. It is gratefulness in the same way that breath is a threshold between that place of deep knowing, the subconscious, the unconscious, the part of us that breathes us. And now I will move to my poems. And this I'm reading from Peace on Earth. This is a book of prayers from around the world, collected and illustrated by Bijou Latour, who used to live in Sag Harbor, such a beloved presence in Sag Harbor. And she illustrated this, her books with these beautiful watercolor illustrations. And we helped her collect these poems as prayers and these prayers as poems for this book. And so two of mine are in here. This is the illustration for this one. All you creatures with wings, eagle and bee, ichneumon fly and wren, as you fly on our mother's breath, I, your little sister, ask you, carry my heartbeat morning prayer in your wing beat. How I love you, how I thank you. Carry it up to our mother's lap Carry it into our Father's ear. Carry it 3 times around the belly of earth. The bee, climbing the last blossom, hears. I never forget you, oh, forever last one. I am hearing, I in my place am hearing your voice, dear Father, the honeybee song deep in the field. Lift me to your listening place. I am singing my own small prayer among the voices of the field. I am the voice like the cricket. Bring me close to you so you can hear my voice inside all the other voices. Is your listening deep in earth's belly? I will put my ear down and I will listen. Now I put my voice on the cricket's wings and send him down the earthways to you. Are you in earth's heart? When my heart hurts, hear my heart's voice, God, calling you under her stones. When I am scared in the dark, hear my heartbeat in the night rain. You listen with the doe's ears as she stands still in the footprints of her listening. Hear me, dear Father. And when I hear that you are listening, I will rise up tall inside myself, the way the cricket hears his own sound strong inside his black shell as the voice of the mountain. And now I'll read from Birdsong Under the Wisdom Tree. And this one is called Curious. Curious how the skyway opens, relinquishes the darkness until what lingered in shadow unfolds its crown light and seeps through my eyes into the bed of my heart, only a little disheveled from a peaceful sleep, and sees in its clairvoyance my unborn wish to sail back around the peninsula into the bright sea, where the Blessed One waits like a flame behind the sun. What question opens my silver reticence? Gladness flies up on your return. Am I worthy, yet finally worthy of your embrace? Return to me, oh my friend, and I will rinse the air with blue words. Give me the simple, give me the joy, give me the wisdom of bees in their hives. Give me the open hand and the color from behind the veil. I remember now. I open the door to you. Welcome, my friend. The wind is washing away the sand between the ages as we move closer to the center where all our beginnings sprang hopeful to this moment. We are here. We are together. Take up the cup together. A door in the cedars. There is no sign at the door in the forest. It's perfect and broken and lets the wind through. Would you come with me? Can I show you what I found? Every time we speak erases another line. So let's be as quiet as the growing roots. Just take my hand and pass through the blue edges of the trees that look like sky. The magic way through, formed of daytime starlight, that cuts a path across the fabric of our reasonable mind. Ha, it is here. We passed it long ago and never saw it. Only on doubling back to where we began did we see the back of it. But now we are different, so that on opening it and going through, this door of wind and light. We melt what we thought we were into drops of rain on the tips of cedar. And this one is this place within. And this is really about that place of reflection and communion. That is the spiritual presence, the practice of being with the spiritual presence, touching it and hoping to touch it. I return to this place within, so like a grove of sacred trees, ringing a circle of light deep in the interior of wild forest. I know it as well as my own thoughts, although I've only been here a few times in my life, and find it changed every time, like a child's face, but is familiar through love. What allows me to come back broken and smelling of the ways of the world? What even welcomes me? What recognizes the single flame of my soul and sounds the one note call, resounding over distance, that no one else can hear? What remembers me when I have forgotten myself? What pulls me to the center and sits me down in the light and combs my hair with wind and unwinds the words from my heart and spills me out upon the ground and rearranges me like petals spilled from a flower that only blooms one night, then touches the seed already rolled into the soil at the roots of those wise trees with that same touch of moisture that lit the flame of life in their fibers centuries ago, before people knew to gather them for medicine and for food. What bows me down under an invisible power that presses the darkness to the surface and makes it shyly pop open so that I can let go of it in the light of the gaze of all those gathered round me, like the ancient mothers of all that is? What loves me beyond my own circumference, deeper than time, unqualified like a river, at the moment it breaks into the sea? And then this last one, pearl rain. Pearl rain casts down curtains of what we thought we knew, gathered back at the corners to show the light in each pane. And at the threshold, you might stop to turn a reverent eye towards the stream behind you, where the light slants into the shallows, before stepping through the door, before asking what you wanted to hold back from the people who shake the rain from their hair. To give instead to those who understand what you feel before you say the first word, as they wait patiently, underlining your performance with their voices joined together under the eaves like a round of permission given to you no matter what you do, between the moment you leave their presence outside and turn inside to where love awaits you. You break into a run along the hall towards the pull of qualities you long for in each one, of resonance, of affirmation, of clear and utter recognition without once having to announce yourself, your name or your intention. For in this place, all is given, as if drinking nectar from the throat of the medicinal flower. And of course, you are forgiven everything before you even reach her, she who knew you before you were born, and sounds the hand drum with one hand, while the other stretches out to you in a gesture of welcome. Like no one gives where you have lived too long under the shadows, so that arriving here at her feet brings you to your knees in the velvet dust, unraveling the soreness at the heart of each breath that she perfumes as you breathe and receives like pearls in her hand, like pearls of rain cast down in a curtain around her shining smile, for you to remember who you were before you left your home in the sun, mighty, ancient tree lifetimes ago in the realms of light.
Just stay with that. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Meegan, for your reflections and for your poetry. I just also want to thank you for bringing Bijou Latourde into the conversation, a fantastic artist from Sag Harbor who now has moved back to her native France. So we're going to take a shift from the poets to the fiction writers and hear a little bit about their process and their work. We're going to start with Indira. Indira Ganizin's novels include Inheritance, The Journey, and Sweet as Honey. Her essays and short fiction have appeared in numerous publications, including Black Renaissance and Half and Half, Writers on Biracialism and Biculturalism. Indira teaches at Emerson College. She formerly taught here on Long Island at Long Island University as well. And she hosts a really wonderful global music program Sunday mornings on Cape Cod Radio, WOMR, which I really encourage you all to listen into. So we're very pleased that Indira is with us here today from Provincetown. Let us welcome this talented fiction writer to our Zoom.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming on this afternoon. I was going to address the weather, but the weather seems to be changing. But anyway, in addressing this topic of spirituality as a writing practice, writing as a spiritual practice, I think of religion and ritual and superstition and belief, as well as mystery and spirit. Writers are a superstitious lot. We have favorite pens and pencils. We earmark certain notebooks and only that kind to start our drafts, even if we must find that particular brand above what our local stationers might supply. Aesthetics, of course, plays a role in choosing your medium, but so does ritual. There's a lot of peculiarity associated with writers and their rituals. Some can't bear to see anyone, or worse, speak to someone else before writing, or the whole game is ruined. Our egos are fragile and the work is slippery. There's this thing called the muse, a goddess really, who may or may not favor you. It's an absolute crapshot whether the words will come or not and in the right order. Some writers adhere to set rules about the time of day. Toni Morrison liked to beat the sun and wake at 4:30 to start her work, while Hemingway liked to stop a day's work in the middle of a sentence. Some follow strict diets, some must meditate for 30 minutes before a single word is written, and some promise themselves a treat if they complete X number of words a sitting. What writers do then is construct an elaborate scaffold to contain the writing. And I think this falls within the category of spirituality. I believe that writers sense there are other forces, though, at play when writing. I was raised in an Orthodox Hindu tradition and grew up respecting books. And Salman Rushdie's, you might have read, has written about this, how he was taught to kiss books as a child. And that was his devotion to the written word. Likewise, I was taught never to step on books. And if one does accidentally, rushing, say, across a room, one is supposed to immediately touch the book and touch one's eyes, thereby apologizing to the book and seeking pardon for oneself, because the book is nothing else than a sacred object. The first scribe was Ganesha, the elephant-headed god who wanted to write down the Mahabharata, which he already knew was going to be the greatest story in the universe. And he also knew that it would be composed by the poet Vyasa. So he approached Vyasa in the woods, and Vyasa agreed, but so long as he could compose without any interruption, and if he could start immediately. So Ganesha at once broke off the tip of one of his tusks, ready to, write down the words, act as scribe. And this is what it takes to compose a story. and write it all down, we were taught. My favorite holiday is Saraswati Puja, which in South India is celebrated near the end of a 9-day festival honoring the goddess Parvati. And Saraswati is the goddess of wisdom. And as children, we would pile our school books in front of the shrine where an image of the goddess was radiant in a white sari playing a sitar with 2 of her swans nearby. She was the goddess of art, of literature, and music. And in addition to our textbooks, we would add our pens and pencils, our rulers, compasses, anything we used to create. Had we been artists, we would have placed our paintbrushes and canvases as well. A puja would then be performed with some light and flowers and food and fruit. But blessings aren't bestowed just for the asking. Once we placed our items at the shrine, we had to refrain from reading and writing for 1 full day. By sacrificing, by fasting, if you will, we proved ourselves worthy, capable of discipline and devotion to our studies. Best were the times when the holiday fell on a weekend, because then it was easier to avoid schoolwork and reading and writing. But in any case, the next morning, before bathing, before eating, which was already like really weird to like go to see God, before like you bathed, which is practically sacrilegious. We would approach the shrine at dawn in the chill of a September or October morning, depending on the moon, and opened our books. We'd read a little, write a little, seated before the goddess, because now we were ready to face our endeavors. We had been blessed. To this day, my aunt and my mother placed my novels in front of the shrine to help me along with my work on Saraswati Puja Day. So this practice of sacrifice and ritual is, of course, religious, but it's also spiritual. Atheism has long stood side by side with the arts, this organized religion. I think after like the 2 world wars began to splinter our long-held beliefs worldwide. And one could become orthodox and unbending in one's views, or give it up altogether. And spirituality began to make a headway as an alternative, a way to say, well, I may not be religious, but I am spiritual. But what does that mean exactly? That one is inclined to trust that the universe offers more, perhaps, than we can know, that not everything is in our power, that there are more things in heaven and earth than dreamed up by our philosophy. There is, say, magic, mystery, even revengeful ghosts. Writing takes work, discipline, long hours alone in a room with the door shut, at a table. But there's magic in the creation, some fissures of being that aren't easily explained. If a writer tries to get to that state of inspiration by using ritual, by meditation, even prayer, selecting the favorite pen, by playing, say, a certain piece of music before starting a new chapter, and always playing the same music throughout the years, then can we blame them? Because spirituality, perhaps, is a way to approach art, to accept the mystery, to take what we create out of our hands. I think when I'm writing really well, I become more of a conduit for an imagination that seems to exist outside of myself. I think this is what it means when the writing writes itself. You just have to sort of get out of the way and let the words flow. So those are some thoughts, along with a lot of generalizations about spirituality and religion. It's dangerous these days to say that you're, even, Hindu, because Hinduism is just so messed up right now in the world. But this is really about the traditions that I was raised in, and ultimately the traditions I do turn to in great times of need. Because it's to say these prayers, for instance, offers me some solace and a sense of something familiar. I didn't have any writing to share, but I thought, listening to the poets, that maybe I'll share a poem if I can. And it's short, and it's in here somewhere, if I can find it. Or, you know what? I'm not seeing it immediately, so maybe I'll share it during our conversation. But anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Indira. A lot of wonderful thoughts, and as with the others, that maybe we'll even dive into a little bit deeper when we have our conversation. I'm pleased to say that Marianne has finally been able to join us, so welcome back, Marianne. We're sorry about all your technical difficulties. But let's move forward to our fourth writer who we're happy to have with us today, Merzban Shroff. Merzban's stories and essays have appeared in over 70 journals, including the Gettysburg Review, World Literature Today, and the American Scholar. His acclaimed recent short collection, Third Eye Rising, which is at the store, was featured on the Esquire list of best books of 2021. He's received 7 Pushcart Prize nominations, and there's much more to his biography as with the others, but we'll leave it at that for the moment. He's joining us late at night from Mumbai. We're very happy about that. Let's give a warm Zoom welcome to Merzban.
Catherine, Marianne, thank you very much. I think the very fact that we are connecting here after almost 12 years since we first met. It was a brief 20-minute meeting in Sag Harbor when I was on my reading tour for my debut, Breathless in Bombay. And the very fact that 12 years later, we are still in touch and they're still promoting my books. My books are living, breathing entities at Canio's. I think that itself is an assertion and a triumph of spirituality at work. You know, so thank you very much, guys. It's been a real pleasure. What I'm going to do is, so when initially Catherine and Marianne ran this topic past us, I realized that it was a minefield. And I said, you know, spirituality, because the minute you tell people that it's a spiritual process, oh, you know, it's something, you know, it's something too deeply personal. But the fact is that spirituality is a journey from the personal to the universal. It's a journey from empathy to unity. Having said that, I'd like to share with you, let's look at the work ethic of some of our favorite writers. Starting with my hero, John Steinbeck. So Steinbeck would come to work daily, sharpen 12 pencils, and then he would write for 8 hours continuously till his fingers bled. James Joyce was warned that he was going to go blind, he was going blind with glaucoma, and yet he chose to write. Only thing, he started writing with colored pencils so he could see. Then there was Isaac Babel, a great short story writer, who was warned time and again that he was going to run in problem with Stalin's government. And eventually they pulled him out of his house and shot him. And his last words were, "They did not let me finish my stories." Then there was this Egyptian feminist writer who you all must have heard of, Nawal el-Saadawi, who was imprisoned in 1981 for her writings against female genital mutilation. And she was disallowed pen and paper to write. But what she did was she would write on toilet paper with an eye pencil borrowed from a prostitute in the next prison cell. Now, what is common to all these writers? There's just one thing. I mean, you could call it courage, you could call it persistence, you could call it commitment. But deep down, there's just one thing they all had, is spiritual strength. And that's why I think spirituality and spiritual awareness is extremely important for a writer. But of course, it's not always this way. I mean, it takes you time to realize that spirituality manifesting itself. And with that, I'd like to share with you my own journey and my own awakening, how I came about it. So I started writing about 20 years ago. And I decided I was in a very comfortable corporate job. I was in advertising, making loads of money, living a very high profile life. And I decided that eventually my advertisement's going to come, you know, my creativity is going to come on a newspaper, which is worth a few bucks. And there's going to be nothing enduring about it. So I need to kind of get off the bandwagon and try and do something meaningful. And I always wanted to write. So I said, I'm going to start writing. So I gave up a perfectly lucrative practice and I started writing. I wrote for 2 years. Initially I wrote plot-based stories, you know, with the conventional twist and tale, a bit a la O. Henry and F. Scott Fitzgerald, you know, that kind of stuff. I realized something wasn't quite working. After 2 years, I had this tremendous sense of disenchantment. And that was because when I looked around, I saw, if I would go to bookstores, I saw that there was just too much writing and there was too little literature. So I started asking myself this hard-nosed question that, listen, why do you want to write? I mean, is there a need for another writer? You know, what is the purpose of you writing? At the same time, I kind of looked around and I saw the enormous diversity in my country, and I realized that I was a sham. I said, Mazban, you don't know how the other half thinks. You have no clue how people in the villages live. And if you have to be, as an advertising man, the poor never mattered because the poor didn't have the buying power. But as a writer, I had to understand the motivations of the less privileged, and I had to understand the holistic picture that was India. So with this in mind, I started journeying to the villages of India and staying with tribals. And I started understanding migration patterns. So speaking to the tribals, I realized that they did not want to be in the city. They would rather be in the villages. They felt that nature was the provider. They would tell me, look, we get everything from the forest. We get our food, our firewood, our fodder, our medicinal herbs, even the bamboo that builds our home. We get our fish from the river. So we've got this perfectly self-sufficient lifestyle. Okay, but it's because of displacement. It's something called displacement-based poverty. Because of large projects, they were being shunted out of the villages, they were being ousted, and they would come to the city where they would make their homes on payments and in slums. So I realized that these very slum dwellers whom we would be bitching about and saying, oh, they're ruining our roads, they're proliferating here, actually did not want to be here, and they were shunted because of these kind of rural crimes which were taking place. So once I came back to the city, I came back with a completely different sensibility. And you could say that there was a certain kind of self-realization where I realized that there is no point being in a country like India if you're not conscious of the other. The iniquities are a reminder of what has been delivered to you, the privileges you enjoy, and what has been denied to the other. So once I had this sensibility, I think I was transformed as an individual. And my writing started transforming itself. And that's when my stories started getting acceptance. So I started working on my debut, which was Breathless in Bombay. And there I could tackle a lot of city-based crimes such as corruption, poverty, encroachment, civic apathy. I could look at certain migrant communities, which I would not have looked at earlier. And then once I got into this habit pattern, I started journeying more to the villages. I went to the villages in Bihar, in Madhya Pradesh. I started studying the condition of the girl child, and I started living in that space. So I started. So thus began my journey from the personal to the universal, and understanding that there were three kinds of people in India. There was the haves, the have-nots, and there were the know-nots. And then my purpose of writing became very clear. It was to instruct the know-nots. So Breathless in Bombay was all about migrant communities. Third Eye Rising was about rural kind of lapses, social injustices, like dowry, female exploitation, caste, child apathy, migrant identity. So I could tackle themes which were endemic to the country as a whole. Now, once this process of self-realization was clear, then there came a process of self-illumination, which was sensitization. So when I was living in that space, I was questioning everything. I was questioning my own existence. I was questioning my community. I was questioning my country. That I had this burning question that can you really understand a quagmire like India? With that, I could answer that question in my novel, Waiting for Jonathan Koshi, which incidentally will also have a US release next year, or rather this year in fall. And of course, what manifested as my journey over 20 years was Third Eye Rising. So, and I think once that happened, once you stay in a process where you sensitize yourself, what follows is self-actualization, where your work actually starts getting recognition, and where you understand that your books may not be bestsellers, but they will be long sellers, because you have coming from a different space altogether. So with that, guys, I'm going to start. I'm going to read you a little bit of Third Eye Rising, so which kind of encapsulates my own journey of self-realization. This is an excerpt from a story called A Matter of Misfortune. So you have these two childhood friends in this. One is a soul-searching writer, and the other is a very goal-driven corporate achiever. and they're childhood friends, and they meet one evening. The corporate guy is hosting the writer, and in a span of one evening, all the cracks in their friendship show up, and it's purely because of an ideological difference. I moved to the lawn where Amit and family waited. The evening had brought a pleasant breeze. The sky was dull gray and empty, like a giant auditorium. I had not experienced this in Mumbai, this feeling of vastness, of excess space. There is a nip, but no winter yet, said Amit as he drove us around. The city stretched before us like a lazy python, and the road dipped and loomed suddenly to reveal a cast of winter grey. It felt nice to wear a cardigan, I thought. Winters, I realized, were essential to writers. You could look like Sean Connery in Finding Forrester, or thickly clad and bearded, you could stir firewood and other memorabilia in a log cabin up in the hills. There are some nice spots around here, Sharda had said earlier. You should visit Kasauli, where many writers live. They live in self-imposed isolation, and their fans hang around the bazaar and at the bakery, hoping to catch a glimpse of them. I wonder why these writer fellows get so much attention. What makes them so special? She had laughed loudly, and we joined in too, thinking, here was a holiday well begun, a camaraderie of hearts raring to expand, and wits dying to sparkle. We were passing a long stretch of green, and Amit, slowing the car, said, these parks are the lungs of the city. There are 22 such parks, Sanjay Gandhi's brainchild, you know. Sanjay Gandhi, Indira Gandhi's younger son? I tried to imagine him setting up parks while his men were busy sterilizing young men in villages. Slits, they would go, the Nasbandi experts, tearing at potential roots, and the victims, broken-hearted men, would slink away, shamed by the inability to produce. Seed but no crop, and no crop meant hunger, meant shame. What had the country gone through during the emergency, I wonder? Don't educate, amputate, has always been the Indian way, I think, as Amit takes a turn. That's how the country was run during the emergency. That's how tribals were being displaced from their roots even today to make way for large dams so that water, power, and prosperity could be diverted to corporates. And the real sons of the soil, the tribals, would take their ambitions elsewhere, to cities and slums, where they would usurp places not their own. And they would feel fine about it, because that is exactly what someone had done to them, taken away their fields, their huts, their livelihoods, their history, all in the name of progress. I told Amit this when he asked me what my worldview was, what were the issues that bothered me as a writer. We were back from our drive and had settled in chairs on his lawn. Lights twinkled in bungalows, shaded by trees, the neighborhood was silent. So what are you saying? Asked Amit, leaning over a coal fire he had begun. The nip had arrived and the sky was fluorescent with stars. There should be no progress, no development. The villagers should remain as they are, untouched and steeped in ignorance. That's not the point, I said. There are fairer ways to approach development. It cannot be city-centric, that's for sure. It has to respect the tiller and his way of life. We can't displace him for our own selfish ends. We have to respect his concept of existence. Which is what? Asked Amit. With a poker, he lifted some coals and placed them near the ones that were aflame. Then, leaning the poker against the side of the oven, he rubbed his palms. Which is a cashless society, a society that knows no corruption, no greed, only interdependence and contentment, a society that gets its food from the river, its shelter from the forest, its sustenance from the land it works on. So you're saying let them stay that way, let them remain in the original primitive form. But isn't that selfish? Isn't that a denial of evolution, a denial of civilization? Aren't you denying them a chance to progress? I took a deep breath. I had been down this road before. I knew almost every nook and corner, every turn and curve, and I could see the bumps a mile away. So what is civilization? I asked, reaching for the poker and prodding some coals that were not yet aflame. How, in your words, would you define it? Amit thought for a while, then slowly said, progress, development, needs processing, wish fulfillment, the ability to do more, to rise beyond oneself, the ability to discover, to understand, to achieve, to conquer, and be masters of the universe. His face was flushed. I could picture him in boardrooms, making a pitch to his American bosses, and at management campuses, selling the big global dream to candidates. I looked at the woman. Sharda was silent. Fiona looked anxious. No, specifics, I insisted. Give me specifics. Now, in working terms. I don't follow you, Gussie. Civilization is civilization. What kind of definition are you looking for? He looked bewildered. I smiled. Just the kind you see around you: congested slums, choke cutters, water shortages, lethal pollution, population explosion, inability to cope, inability to contain, hence growing crime, growing greed, land grabbing, encroachments, a buck here, a buck there, no end in sight. But that is so fatalistic, cried Sharda. She sounded agitated, left out on her own turf. But you'll agree that these are the problems of growing cities, I said, ignoring Sharda and looking Amit straight in the eye. He was blinking now, blinking nervously. Fiona was trying hard to catch my eye. I took care to avoid hers. Yes, yes, but that doesn't take away from the importance of city. And they're trying to find solutions, I'm sure. His voice tapered off. You see the nexus, I said. Rural population is pushed towards the urban. Urban boils over and claims some rural land outside urban limits. And urban accommodates the spillover at urban rates. That's your civilization, designed to favor the few at the expense of many. And you are a pawn, not realizing that you're being shafted in the name of progress. That's warped and short-sighted, said Amit. Now you're saying that cities shouldn't expand, that there is a conspiracy at work, a planned destruction? Crazy. No, it is you who are crazy for not seeing, not admitting, I said. I was enjoying myself greatly. For if we could advocate big cars, big salaries, expensive maids, overseas travel, and an overseas posting, then surely, I thought, I could speak up for those who I thought should inherit the earth. So I would like to kind of end this with a quote by one of our great thinkers, Swami Vivekananda. He said the only equality we all have in a country like India is the right to self-realization. And that's what I've tried to establish in this. Because when I would go to the villages and ask these tribals that, why do you think you're being displaced, or why do you think you're being discriminated? They say, oh, it's our karma, you know, it's our legacy. You know, we have historically been exploited and it will go on. So they really attributed it to their thing, you know. So I realized that actually it was their spiritual belief which was giving them the strength to go through all this. And that's how my work, Third Eye Rising, came about. Thank you.
Respond.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your reflections and for your reading. And I apologize, I had to miss some of the beginning of our program. But Mirzban, you remind me that the idea for today's event really came at the through a discussion with yourself and with Indira in a program that we enjoyed together in November.
Yes.
So thank you again for opening this up for us. I would like to suggest at this point we have until 1:45 for discussion among yourselves as panelists. Some of our audience may be their lunch break hour may be concluding, but we do have a little bit more time to talk together if you would like. And so I'd like to offer the panelists an opportunity to make a comment or a question to the other guests, something that has sparked you. And I do see, Catherine, your hand is up, so please.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I see someone's requesting to hear Indira's poem if she's found it. And so if she had found it, I thought we could start with that and then go to a discussion. And if not, please, we would love to have the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. I did find it and I'll read it. I was taking a series of writing courses. Sometimes I do that to kind of when my writing's not going very well. And we always started with a meditation. This was a writing course that was actually taught by a Buddhist poet. I also took a course with Natalie Goldberg, and she also incorporated the same technique of starting with a meditation before asking her students to write. Anyway, this is a poem called Icarus. The chair pose is the hardest pose, deep squat, arms raised above the head in prayer and offering. Imagine your feet tied to a flat board and your hands holding an enormous kite as you stand on the water. Already you have become something forbidden. These kite boarders glide over the waves, and if their kites toss them into the air, They hang like Icarus for a moment, suspended over the sea between grace and flight. Icarus's friends warned him not too far, but what if some egged him on, as I cheered, watching these surfers, exhilarated at their daring, wondering how is it possible to be bird and man and waiting for the fall? My story went another way. I drove home that day without wallet and passport. They must have slid somewhere from my lap. I was the one left bereft with the scent of singed feathers. My dad would have said, "Purse, you should always take your purse," along with other choice words, having panicked often over his lost wallets. The idea that we are immortal, that we can escape the God's wrath. What would you say if I told you this happened after my first COVID vaccination? Life is hard enough balancing on earth before hubris knocks us down. Anyway, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Indira. Thank you. So again, I invite our panelists to jump in with a question, an observation, a comment, perhaps on something you heard from the others. And I just so appreciate the variety of approaches, and pause to give you a moment to think about something you would like to ask each other.
I'd love to ask
So,
Indira and Morsban, you write prose, you write novels.
actually, I had a question for you, Mark.
Well,
Oh,
let me ask one
great.
first.
Go on,
and
go
we'll
on.
right back.
Yeah.
Go on, I'm all yours.
When you're writing a story, do you know where it's going? Or does the story carry you once the characters begin to have their way with you? How does it happen for you, for each of you?
So, Mark, it's kind of telepathic that you asked, because it's exactly the question I had for you, because you said something which truly resonated with me. You said if a poem, there are often moments in a poem where you don't know where it's going. And if you know where it's going, probably it's not a very good poem, So that reminded me of this amazing insight by James Baldwin, where Baldwin says that when you're speaking, you must know what you're saying. But when you're writing, you often don't know what you're saying. And the whole language of writing is trying to find out something you don't want to find out, but something forces you anyway. And I think that is that whole unconscious spark, which we are being led by. So the way it works for me is that I usually have a character type I want to write about. I'm a very character-driven, issue-driven kind of a writer, and I know the kind of premise or the kind of message I would like to convey at the end. What I'm hoping to do with a character, and then I make the character type's journey my own. So if it means doing a lot of research and spending time outside my milieu, I do it. If it means kind of getting into a very contemplative, if I'm writing from my own milieu, which is a slightly more westernized, kind of middle income group or a high income group, then I would be obviously very contemplative and have a very meditative approach to it. For example, in my novel, I had this question is in my novel Waiting for Jonathan Coshey, I was dealing with the question, how do you define success? What is the difference between happiness and gratification? I was dealing with these kind of things there. And when you're living in that space of contemplation, which is actually one arm of spirituality, I think what happens is you end up getting whopping insights. For example, when I was working on my novel, I had this whole insight, because it was a novel about friendship, family, duty, that, if life itself is perishable, why not relationships? So what makes relationships so fragile? So, and through the storyline, I could kind of establish that. So I often kind of have a germ of what I want to say, what I'm trying to address. But I take those questions and I kind of travel with them. I'm also a meditator in practice. I do something called Vipassana, which is this Buddhist technique of meditation, where every year I go and lock myself up in this center for 10 days. I've done a few in the US as well, and you take an oath of silence and you're quiet for 10 days and you just go deep into yourself. and you kind of meditate from 4 in the morning till 9 in the night. So that kind of space comes very naturally to me.
Thank you. How about you, Indira? How do stories happen for you?
I think I often start with an idea, a phrase, and then kind of a general idea of a plot. And often, like Mirzan, I have an idea of where I'd like to end, where my characters might end up. Once the last novel, I wanted to end with a belly laugh, but I wasn't sure how I was going to get there. So the writing does, suddenly your characters do things you don't expect. And it's a very strange thing to because you're actually creating your characters. So how is that even possible, right? But I think it's this kind of mystery that occurs.
And it's also kind of interesting how characters tend to just take a life of their own, and you suddenly realize that, hey, this one's taken over the story and he or she has a lot more to say than the main character.
Yes.
I don't know if that happened with you, Indira.
Yes. Actually, I threw out a whole novel about another character because I had a really good 4 lines, which became
right.
the book because I was more interested in the character who occurred there.
Right.
Does this work for you too, Megan? Do you write poems, knowing, not knowing, discovering on the way?
Oh, it's totally the mystery. Totally the mystery. It's, to me, it's that place, that liminal place where it's a word or a phrase comes to me, and and then it builds from there because it's sound. It's a kind of dance with the unknown, and the sounds of the words come through me, and they create what they create.
That's one of the most demanding parts of translating a lyric poet like Rilke, which is what I spent a good part of my life doing, because the sound is so important. When you're translating, you're not translating meaning, you're translating a kind of experience. And you're so right, Meegan. So much of that experience is something that happens to you as you hear the poem or as you feel the poem. And in a sense, that's what makes translation impossible and necessary and agonizing and marvelous all at the same time.
You know what I love? My favorite is when there are the facing pages of, the original and then the English, so that I can kind of follow and get the sense of the sound. And then check in, if it's a Romance language and maybe I don't know it that well, but at least I have some sense, from what I do know, and then I can live in that space. Then I'm grateful for the translators, giving me those cue cards.
Some of the best-selling translations of Rilke are really terrible. They're wonderful poems, but there's not much Rilke left. And partly because Rilke was a master at twisting syntax and creating impossible things in his language. And most translators in English, especially American translators, fix the problems because they don't trust the reader to face the indeterminacy of an image that doesn't make sense. But it's that not making sense that's so important in deep poems.
Yeah, so important, that not making sense, that's where our humanity lives. That's where our spirit lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Mark,
is there room?
Sorry.
Oh, no, I just, as somebody who's been listening and as also an artist myself, but I'm primarily an actress and a singer. It's been so interesting to hear everybody's process and sort of, how it relates to my process. And I kind of just wanted to say, it's so similar, in the, you have to know certain things, let's say you're working on a script and you have the lines and the text is given to you, but it's about being completely alive and present in the moment and having no idea. The work is about letting go of all preconceived ideas and not actually, letting yourself not know too much, to really be present to the moment, to your breath, to the other person, to the text, to the words, to the room, to the lighting, and let it be alive and fresh in the moment each and every time. And to be on that edge, right? To be in that dance of knowing and not knowing, that kind of extra aliveness and awareness.
Beautifully said. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to just give a moment now to, are there others in the audience who, if you would raise your hand or use your little icon to pose a question? Caroline, I just see you and glad we've connected. Make sure you unmute, please. And go ahead with your question, Caroline. You just need to unmute.
You're muted. Oh.
Well, I think she needs to.
There you go.
Now she's unmuted. Yes.
I just wanted to tell you I'm so honored to be with so many creative people. In the process of being a potter, I work with clay, so I'm not, I don't have this formal structure of writers with outlines and beginning and middles and development and endings. I'm working with this malleable, changeable, poundable, squeezable stuff. But for me, I wanted to say two things about this spirituality. And that is that we all have an equal opportunity as human beings to tap into that light with meditating, with prayer. We're equally, it's equally accessible to us. And the second thing is that in creating anything with pottery, it begins, art for me, begins the minute I step out of the way, which someone mentioned today, and allow myself to be a conduit is when art begins for me with clay. I'm often completely surprised by the path it's taken. I may put a piece of clay on a wheel and think I'm making a bowl, and it becomes a sculpture or a vase. When I let go and put my, for lack of a better word, my own ego out of the way, that's the beginning of art. And I think that that's true for any medium. I could be wrong, but I think it's true for painters, writers, sculptors. You're almost surprised by what you've created. It's almost a surprise, but meant to be.
Yes, Caroline, and I firmly hold that nothing flattens the ego like being a writer, you know. So in fact, in my novel, I have a line saying that, do you know why writers go to heaven? Because they've been through hell on earth. So it's a very good way of eliminating the I.
Well,
You know,
they're writing.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for bringing that up, Caroline. I have a question to circle back around with, but again, I just want to pause to see if anyone in our audience, by a show
Someone
of
has their hand
hands.
up.
Okay, help me out. Someone,
Vimy?
Vimy, and please unmute. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so great. I wish I could sit around with all these writers and just chat away, but
We hope to invite them back. We hope to invite them back, and you as well. So
I have a question. This is for the novelist. So I'm a novelist and I've been writing for 8 years, and I've come to the point where I feel like I'm not really inhabiting my characters as well as I'd want to. I'm not losing interest with the novel, but I don't feel like I'm in their shoes as much as I'd want to be. I want the novel to start writing itself. Do they have any tips on how they inhabit their characters?
Indira,
okay, thank you, Vimy. Yes, anyone want to take that? Inhabiting your characters.
It's hard because sometimes as the years pass, your connection grows a little weaker. because you're changing, but your characters haven't yet changed. So there's that tension. I found that sometimes, or my ideas. Once I wrote a novel about, oh, I don't know, like a 15-year-old in love with a 30-year-old. But in, say, 8 years later, I thought, oh my God, what the hell is she doing? You know, she shouldn't be in that relationship, but I was like sort of stuck. Sometimes it's just, you know, sometimes you could just like do a monologue in the voice of a character that may not be like, even if your novel isn't, say, in first person, just try it, just to get a sense of what might this character say? What might this character say if she's confronted with an overflowing dishwasher? What might she say if she has to argue with someone she loves? What might her reaction be in a situation that may not exist ever in the novel? I think like Chekhov, right? Like used to write all these notes and backgrounds and ideas. You know, what kind of wardrobe does she have? What's her favorite color? What's her favorite thing to make when it's raining?
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, little. It's like sort of tricking yourself back
Right.
into being in love with your character.
Yes.
I'm gonna try that. Mhm.
Also, what's the character's backstory? You know, what are the character's goals, expectations? What would be the character's political beliefs? What would be their religious beliefs? You know, I try to get a pretty clear sense of character, you know, but sometimes I think the work itself will manifest that, you know, that which are the stronger characters. And I think you also tend to build a lot of your characters through dialogues and events, you know. So you try and get the voice of the character right, you know. So once the voice defines itself, a lot of other things start falling into place. Also, one of the things I've found very helpful to the creative process is, and this is something I want to really touch upon with my co-panelist and the audience here, is that, you know, spirituality, this whole thing is, it's a space you live in. So there are other ways in which you nurture your art. So I think it's kind of the kind of people you meet, the kind of, you know, outings you cut out for yourself, you know. I think the kind of books you read, the kind of writers you choose to spend time with. So I think there are a whole lot of other trappings which also come into play, which actually nurtures and facilitates the process. I don't know if you guys would agree with me, you know?
That's an interesting point you're bringing up, Merzban. It's not just the individual practice, but really how you spend your time, how you spend your days, with
how judiciously you use your time. Exactly.
Exactly.
Oh.
I find too, as a poet, I edit poetry for a couple of journals and did for a long time for a press. And one of the first things I ask a poet who gives me work to look at, I ask them what poets they're reading, who are their conversation partners, what inspires them, what intrigues them, what puzzles them. And you can learn a lot about a writer by the company that they keep. And I don't mean the people they keep, yes, but the other writers and you know, if you saw my desk, you'd see there are 4 or 5 poets who are with me all the time. They're right here. Even if I'm not reading their books, I see the titles, their presence, their voice is in my ear. And for writing poetry, that's fundamentally important.
Yes, touchstones. You need sort of these touchstones.
Yeah.
And I think with the influx of social media, it's really important that you define which are your icons and you spend more time with the writers you love, you know? I mean, for me, it's almost a reaction to social media. I mean, I do understand the necessity for social media, but it's like I'm going back to reading with a vengeance. Because, you know, you know, I'd rather spend more time with books than, you know, spend it online kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't know if that works for you all too.
Yeah. No, that's interesting you mentioned it. When I left this morning to the shop, there was a program on the 1A National Public Radio on these religious apps that are very popular on the phone, you know, ways of praying, meditating, what have you. I'm not familiar with them, but I thought, more screen time. Anyway, they help some people, and that's a good thing. So I would suggest we're probably going to draw things to a close in just a few moments. So again, this is meant really as an introductory a program on a very rich topic that, as you see, can go in many different directions. But I just want to pause briefly in case there is one more question from our audience members. And Catherine, you can help me spot something. Okay. So let me close with great gratitude to all four of our guests, and apologies for not being with you for the entire time. I look forward to our recording of this event, which will be posted soon on our website. So I invite all our audience members to take another look and sit with the time with these wonderful writers. Again, to remind you, we have all the writers' books available at the bookshop at 290 Main Street for you to come in and get directly, or we are also part of the bookshop.org online ordering service. It's a nonprofit ordering service, and they support independent bookshops. We look forward to forthcoming works. Mark's book on Rilke, Merzbon's novel, Indira's novel, something forthcoming from Meegan. We have classes to attend and music to listen to. All of our writers have websites. We can find more about them. Catherine, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone and to really underscore how much we appreciate the thoughtfulness that the four writers put into bringing their spiritual journey and their experience to the audience today. I made a lot of notes, just really a lot of things to think about. And I'll only mention one. A couple people mentioned the use of pencils. So let us all praise pencils and their what they bring, the gravity that they bring to our lives. And I look forward to expanding this. Hey, good, Mark, you've got yours right there. To expanding this conversation in the weeks ahead. So we'll be talking to these writers and others and bringing more to you all in the future. So yeah, join us tonight and join us for the other programs that I've popped into the chat. Marianne, I'll let you draw us to a final close. Thank you.
Again, with great appreciation and gratitude and inspiration for all of us. Each one of you have given so much of your time and your thoughts in preparing your remarks today. And we're so grateful for that. Let us all bring that forward in our own works. And we do hope to meet again with each of you in different situations. But I bid you all a wonderful rest of your day or nighttime, depending on where you're joining us. You've been a wonderful set of panelists and a wonderful audience. So with great gratitude, I bid you all farewell. Good day until we meet again. Peace, everyone.
Thanks, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much, Marianne.
Pleasure.
You're very welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you so
great
much.
to see everyone. You guys were great, really, really marvelous. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah, we'll talk
Thanks,
about
Mark.
some new ideas to come and different pairings and to be continued, let's put it that way. So
Great.
thanks
Yeah,
again.
A lot of
Okay.
wonderful comments in the chat for you all to know. I don't know if you were able to follow it, but people really appreciated hearing what you had to say. So
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Marianne, for the opportunity. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Stay well,
much.
guys.
See you next
Yeah.
time.
Bye-bye.
well.
Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
take care.
Yeah.